Hello, and thank you for joining us for our weekly object talk. My name is Eliana, and I'm a member of the learning team at the Jewish Museum. Today, I'm delighted to introduce Janet Leifer, one of our wonderful volunteers, who will be talking to us about an object from our collection. Janet has been volunteering at the museum for 2 years, mainly supporting our school workshops and also helping visitors in the galleries. Janet will be exploring an object from our collection, which is connected to our theme of the month, which is culture. This object is part of the Jewish Museum's designated collection of over 40,000 objects that shows the diversity of Jewish life and history, and our programs exist to explore connections between faiths and cultures. So I will hand over to Janet, who will be exploring this object from our collection.
I wanted to find out more about the writer Israel Zangwill and was shown this theatre programme for his play Children of the Ghetto, performed on Monday 11th of December 1899 at the Royal Adelphi Theatre in the Strand, London. This was the opening night. The author, Israel Zangwill, was a well-respected writer who had been called the Dickens of the Ghetto. It was the first time Jews were portrayed as authentic characters on stage, rather than the stereotypes like Fagin or Svengali that British audiences were familiar with. The play revolutionized the portrayal of Jews on stage. It is based on Zangwill's novel of the same title, published in 1892, and centers around a romance between Hannah Jacobs and David Brandon, forbidden to marry by Hannah's father on a point of Jewish law. The couple plan to run away to the USA and marry there, but Hannah decides she cannot abandon her family and their traditional Jewish way of life. She chooses family and Jewish tradition over love. The heroine finds herself torn between two worlds, the traditional and the modern, the religious and the secular. Israel Zangwill grew up in the East End of London, the ghetto, and valued its way of life and beliefs, but he wanted to be accepted in wider society, to be both a Jew and an Englishman. A famous writer, a well-known story of Jewish life in the East End of London, being performed for a wide audience in English. With all these things going for it, the producers were hoping for a successful run. What could possibly go wrong? The play had opened in the United States, touring from Washington to Baltimore and Philadelphia, ending in New York. The tour lasted for a year, and the play was well received and considered a success on the whole. But there was some criticism of its theme from Jews and non-Jews. In New York, Zangwill's comments on New York theatre critics caused some of them offence, and may in part have resulted in the less generous reception it received there. A hasty decision was made to transfer the production to London at very short notice. The whole company, actors and backstage staff, arrived in London with very little time to prepare for the opening and with very little publicity. The production opened on 11th of December 1899, a week in which the fighting in the Boer War was going very badly for the British. Anti-Semitic feeling increased because it was believed that London Jewish financiers had conspired with Jewish mine owners in South Africa to push Britain into a war that would serve their personal economic interests. Anti-Semitism was widespread in Europe in the 1890s, with pogroms in Russia, the Dreyfus Affair in France, increasing anti-Semitism in Germany, Austria, and Romania. The Adelphi Theatre usually showed melodramas, so a non-Jewish audience may not have been expecting to see a drama about Jewish life. The play opened just before Christmas, which may not have been an ideal time for a realist portrayal of Jewish ghetto life. The play ended its run in London after 6 nights and 1 matinee. Theatre goers were surprised at the abrupt closure. A theatre critic in the Jewish Chronicle blamed Jews who had hesitated to go to the production in its first week because they were concerned how non-Jewish theatre goers would view the performance. The production returned to the USA and opened in Chicago, where it was well received. In December 1904, a Yiddish production opened in New York. This production was for a Jewish audience and so was not controversial. In 1915, a silent black and white film version based on the novel and the play appeared. Zangwill had no involvement in this. Both the novel and the play caused concern among Jews in the United States and Britain. During the 1890s, as a result of pogroms in the Russian Empire, many Russian Jews were desperate to emigrate, and large numbers wanted to settle in Britain and the USA. Their arrival was not always welcome, and they were regarded with suspicion. The more established Jews in America and Britain were concerned about the way Zangwill portrayed Jewish life in the ghetto to the wider society. They did not wish to be associated with the Jews of the ghetto. Some members of the Jewish community were prominent in economic and political life. Mary Jane Rochelson, an American scholar writing on Victorian and Anglo-Jewish literature, comments on Zangwill's Children of the Ghetto. Zangwill sets up a situation in which the ghetto, with all its poverty and misery, is the true spiritual and ethical center of Judaism. With increased opportunities to assimilate into the majority culture comes the danger of forgetting Judaism and its morality. Israel Zangwill was a well-known and successful author involved in artistic life in Jewish and English circles, as well as a journalist and a literary and social critic well known for writings on Jewish issues. He was the son of immigrants from Eastern Europe who settled in the East End of London. His father was a devout Jew who in his later years moved to Jerusalem on his own. The family was poor, but he and his siblings were well educated. Israel Zangwill attended the Jewish Free School, where he later taught for a short while. The school aimed to help pupils integrate into English society whilst retaining their Jewish identity and heritage. He then attended London University. Israel Zangwill was interested in the issues of the time, supporting the suffragette movement and Zionism, and speaking out against poverty and war. And now on the screen, there's a picture of a suffragettes meeting, and the gentleman standing right in the middle at the front under the banner, "Women's Will Beats Asquith's Won't," is Israel Zangwill. And there are two ladies standing next to him, and it's possible that one of them is his wife, who was one of the founders of the Jewish League for Women's Suffrage, which was open to male and female members. So this could very well have been one of their meetings that had been organized. The organization sought both political and religious rights for women. It came together with other suffragists to join the United Suffragists who favored less militant protest. Israel Zangwill was a friend of Eleanor Marx, the youngest daughter of Karl Marx. He co-wrote a play with her entitled A Doll's House Repaired, which satirized the English public's reaction to Ibsen's A Doll's House. Zangwill favored the creation of a Jewish state, a safe home for Russian Jews. He met Herzl when he visited London and attended Zionist congresses. Initially, he supported Herzl's idea of a Jewish state in Palestine, but he then went on to form the Jewish Territorial Organization, whose aim was the settlement of Jews anywhere in the world. It was proposed that Jews should settle in British East Africa. In later life, he returned to Zionism. In 1908, his play, The Melting Pot, was performed in the USA. Zangwill wrote, "America is God's crucible, the great melting pot, where all the races of Europe are melting and reforming. Germans and Frenchmen, Irishmen and Englishmen, Jews and Russians, into the crucible with you all. God is making the American." He saw the USA as a country Jewish immigrants should be encouraged to settle in, and a possible alternative to a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Zangwill was always forthright and said what he thought. In 1923, he spoke to a packed audience in Carnegie Hall about Zionism. and said, "Political Zionism is dead." This did not go down well. He opposed the fighting in the First World War, holding all sides responsible for starting the war because of increased nationalism. Nonetheless, when he died in 1926, he was mourned as a highly gifted writer and speaker for his devotion to his fellow Jews and sympathy for all people who suffered injustice. Jews today remain concerned about how they are perceived in wider society, about issues of integration and identity in modern society. This is a subject that Jewish writers tackle nowadays. For example, Howard Jacobson writes about this in his novel, The Finkler Question. So thank you very much to everyone who has listened to my talk, and I hope that you found it interesting.
Thank you so much, Janet, for a really interesting object talk on a very prominent Jewish figure of his era and also beyond as well. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Do join us next week, where we'll be exploring another object from our collection, also connected to the theme of culture.